To sweep the earth clean, that's a really powerful phrase. And held out so long at the end of that piece sort of gives the imagery of everything sliding off the earth. There is this idea that we hold in our communal history of the first melting of the glaciers, of the Great Flood. But the earth has been changing. And I want to say in 1875, John Muir wrote, "A glacier is a current of ice derived from snow. Complete glaciers of the first order take their rise on the mountains and descend into the sea, just as all complete rivers of the first order do. In North Greenland, the snow supply and general climatic conditions are such that its glaciers pour directly into the ocean. And so undoubtedly did those of the Pacific slope during the flush times of the glacial epoch. But now the world is so warm, and the snow crop so scanty, nearly all the glaciers left alive have melted to mere hints of their former selves. This change upon the earth is continual. The climate has been changing for a long time. It was at first difficult for the people who lived near the river Thames and derived their income from ferrying people across the river to make that change into celebrating the change. And I want to acknowledge that it can be difficult to hold this change, even knowing that it's been happening for a long time, knowing that our human enterprise has contributed to it is difficult to hold. The glacial melt, the rising sea temperatures. But I want to share a story. In 2014, I was invited on a hike on Lake Superior, not around Lake Superior to its hills and forests surrounding it, but actually out onto the lake. I was told that it was happening less and less as climate changed, and maybe a decade had passed since you could access the ice caves near the Apostle Islands. Lake Superior is so large that it holds 10% of the Earth's fresh water. Imagine how cold it must be for that entire lake to freeze from liquid to solid. That winter, the extreme polar masses had kept temperatures below zero more often than above zero. It was a rare event for 90% of the lake to freeze solid. We drove north as a small group and bundled up in our layered coats and boots and mittens and hiked out onto the lake. We were not alone. There were many hikers. And even though it was entirely frozen, and I was told that there was little danger, I held my breath at each subtle cracking sound, imagined or real. I was awestruck by the enormous icicle formations dripping persistently down the face of the ice cliffs. Melting ice carried sediment that was yellow, blue, and white, and translucent in places, hanging off the rusty red-colored sandstone cliffs. The ice caves that we witnessed were unique and temporary. The last time the lake was stable enough to hike on was one day in 2026 and a brief 9-day period in 2015. So it happens irregularly. It is pretty rare. But part of what was unique about that experience was that the surface of the lake had fresh snow that hikers were packing down with their boots. The sun was high in the sky. Our hike hugged closely to the ice caves formed by the freezing temperatures. And if you turned to look out away from the cliffs, out towards the lake, the snow, the white snow, it went on till the horizon. It was complete whiteout, blinding. It was breathtaking. It was a reminder for me how small and tiny I was compared to the vastness of the lake, then the entirety of the earth. I wondered what the earth had endured. I imagine for some folks, my experience of humility was similar to seeing the Earth's rise photograph. The earth appearing to rise like the sun over the horizon, over the horizon of the lunar landscape of craters and mountains, emerging out of unimaginable stretches of darkness beyond. A blue-green marble appearing over the horizon. The awareness of our planet as a whole, and then our human smallness in the universe. This smallness might be an asset as we devise ways forward amidst a changing climate. Perhaps our attention should turn to loving what is local, as Sam suggested, with the fog, or to one of the smallest plants on our planet, as Robin Wall Kimmer suggests, moss. She writes, mosses were the first plants to blanket the earth, and I wouldn't be surprised if they were also the last. In successive waves of evolution and extinction, the once dominant is replaced. Far more plant species have come and gone and evolved and become extinct than are alive today. That scares us, and it should. The lesson is clear. Adapt to change or become extinct. It's your choice. And we have a choice. We can notice our place in the interconnected web of all creation or hide in fear. As we notice the glaciers are melting and rising, temperatures in the sea are changing the life there, we also need to change. We need to alter our behavior, use less plastics, as Deborah noted in her reflection, and be aware of the change that is happening around us in the way the music today has brought to our attention. We can, after all, also look to moss to shape the way we are in the world. First, mosses make minimal demands on their surroundings. Second, in the correct conditions of water and light, their green carpet expands, and when there are fewer resources available, they stop expanding. Third, they do not die or perhaps despair, but instead follow the natural cycles of the world. They pause their expansion in times of uncertainty. This restraint that moss shows is in direct opposition to the culture that we exist in, a culture that demands production and expansion at all costs, at the expense of other species, at the expense of the lives of other humans, extracting joy, safety, and love. Until we can, as Kimmerer suggests, reject the nonsense of accumulation, the delusion of permanence, and the endless striving for productivity. Working together, we can build an equitable world, one in which we're aware that change is part of being alive in this world. A world in which acceptance of our part in climate change does not mean that we're hiding our head under a pillow or in the sand, whichever metaphor works best for you. One in which we love and enjoy our home, the fog, the bay, here, living on this planet, while not being blind to the impact that we have on those and the planet that keeps us full of breath and sustains our daily being. A world in which we can share our available resources with a sense of abundance, not mired by the fear that we will not have enough in our hearts and in our actions. Let us replace scarcity with abundance and generosity. May it be so, and amen.